Hey you, watching this video, spread love.
Bienvenidos and welcome back, Familia, to another episode of the Tower of Torres podcast, the podcast that's dedicated to spreading love all around the world. If this is your first time meeting me, hello and welcome. I am Leonardo Torres, and this is our good friend Mustachio. And Mustachio is more than just a mustache. It is a mission. I am on a mission to reach 100,000 subscribers. So I grew out the mustache until I reach 100,000 subs, and then he's just gonna be gone. So if you enjoyed today's content at any moment, hit that like button and subscribe. All right, family, I'm excited because this is the first pastor that we have on the podcast. He left a comment on reckless love that really caught my attention. I asked him to come on here and speak about it. Without further delay, welcome Pastor Mike. Enjoy the show. Pastor Mike, it's so good to talk to you.
Good to see you, Leonardo. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you. Welcome to the Tower of Torres podcast, my friend.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I wanted to talk to you because you left a very interesting comment on one of my videos on reckless love, and I just thought, you're a pastor. I wanted to maybe dig a little deeper into that conversation. But before we get to that, would you mind just taking a minute to introduce yourself and let people know who you are?
Yeah, so I'm Pastor Mike. I'm a youth pastor. I've been a youth pastor now, working in youth ministry for over 13 years. I'm based out of Pennsylvania. Grew up in the Philadelphia area. I have done youth ministry out here for a very long time. I did have a 3-year stint up in North Dakota. Very weird to be in a completely different state, but it was awesome. God used me, and it was a different culture. But really just working with kids, working with families, and really hitting on the topic that we're about to talk about today quite often. So I'm really excited.
Awesome. Pennsylvania. I've heard great things about Pennsylvania, especially in the autumn. A lot of people say, hey, if you love autumn, definitely Pennsylvania is the place to go. Yeah.
Yes. We get 3-month seasons, and it's 4 3-month seasons. So it's great. It's very well organized out. Unlike when I was in North Dakota, you had summer for 3 months, you had 1 day of spring and fall on either end, and you had 9 months of winter. So completely different.
Yeah, well, it seems like it's always summer here in California. We have. Right. Yeah. When it's hot, it's hot. It's like, especially I'm out here in the desert. I'm like in Riverside County. So.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and when it gets hot, boy, it gets hot, and when it gets cold, I don't like to complain, because I met somebody from Walla Walla, and they were like in a tank top and shorts, and I was like over here with like 3 sweaters, and I was like, man, this is cold. He's like, man, this is great weather. Right, but anyway, enough about the weather. We didn't get on here to talk about the weather. Everybody knows what the weather is like. And if you're watching this live, let me know what the weather is like in the live chat right now. Excellent. So, Pastor Mike, I'm gonna pull up your comment that you. Oh, sorry, just not just me. I want you on screen. The comment that you left on the song, and you said, you asked an amazing question, Leonardo. Thank you. No, why can't we love this way? Oh, why can't we love this way? I forgot how to read this morning. I would start by saying, because we are distracted. And that's what caught my attention. I was like, we're distracted. Okay. Someone once wrote, where you spend your time is where your value lies. This love can only come from God, but we chose to be distracted by this world, which is fleeting. That's another word that caught my attention. And chose our own desires over him. His love is perfect. Without him in our lives, we will never see the kind of love that comes from us. We will never see that kind of love come from us. Sorry, I'm dyslexic today too. I hope this helps on your journey. And you said more, but I just wanted to leave it at that. So can you tell me a little bit about, first of all, how you came to the channel, and second, what made you leave this message?
Yeah, so I came to the channel just from being on YouTube, and it came up in my recommended. I watch a lot of reaction videos and things, and it came up, reckless love, Corey Asbury, non-Christian, is like reacting. I was like, oh, okay, this could be interesting. So I sat down, I watched, and I saw you have this very emotional response to the song. And as I've gotten to know you by watching some of your videos, also talking to you, I can see that you're very in tune with the music and very in tune with the lyrics. And I watched that actually right after it came out. And I didn't write any comments initially. I was just like, oh, wow, this guy really, is wrestling through what this means to love and what love looks like. And then just as you saw on the post was recent, it came back up on my feed for some reason. I was like, I'll watch it again. Why not? So I sat down and watched it, and then that question you asked stuck out. Why can't we love like this? And I was like, I feel like I just need to say something. I figured it's like 10 months out. The odds that he's going to read it are like next to none, but why not? Let's give it a shot. So yeah. And you know, I didn't want to be that cliche, like, oh, well, it's God's love and it can only come from God, which I mean, in essence, there's some truth to that. But I think there's a lot of it is that our world today and our culture, we get distracted by everything that's going on. We're just so busy. We got so many things going on that to focus in on love and to focus in on God and to focus in on being selfless is eludes us because we're so distracted by everything that's around us.
Yeah, that word distracted. So when we're looking at something that like we're distracted from what? What's on this side?
Yeah, so I think what's on this side is, you know, we get distracted from what is important in life. I think that, and again, I'm coming from a religious standpoint. For me, we get distracted from God and we get distracted from what he has for us. And when we get distracted in that way, even Christians find themselves going, wow, I don't see, you know, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness in my life as much as I think I would as a Christian. And it's because we get so distracted and get so caught up in all the busyness and things of this world that we don't take the time to take a step back and just relax and meditate and take the time with God to sort of reboot, if you will. I think that there is that need. And as I said at the end of the post, you know, this love can only come from God. So if you don't have that, we can talk about that more obviously in depth, but you know, if you don't have that relationship and that relationship isn't being grown and isn't being nurtured, how can you expect to then glean that result? You know, the age old thing, you reap what you sow, right? So we're reaping what we sow. And if we're going to be sowing a bunch of busyness and that's what we're sowing, then we're only going to reap what that brings, which is usually stress. So we just have to think about, you know, what are we planting? What are we doing? What are we investing our time in? As that quote said, I love that quote so much. I wish I knew who it was. Someone in the comments, if you know who wrote that, please say, but where you spend your time is where your value lies. And for those of you who are in school, I'm not saying like when you're in school, I'm saying when you have your free time, when you have time to do what you want to do, where are you spending it? Because that's where your value ultimately lies.
When I hear you say that, I think of something that Christ had mentioned about how your seeds land on different grounds, like on different ground, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people, I don't think that they know that they're purposely planting, you know, things that are not beneficial to them. And so sometimes, what would you say to someone who maybe has never ever been shown any kindness, any love, and yet they're trying to understand this concept of God loves me? Like how? Like why? Like nobody's ever shown me that. So am I supposed to tap into my imagination? Am I supposed to imagine this love that God has for me? What would you say to a person that maybe that might be their experience?
Yeah, I think that's a great question again, Leonardo. For someone who hasn't experienced that kind of love, or is like, how do I envision what this is? I think the biggest thing is to understand what love is the first step. What is love? I think, and we talked about this briefly the other day. I really think that this world has used the word love out of context way too much. And we've lost sight of what the word actually means. And I think that's where you need to start. If you're someone who says, I haven't experienced that kind of love, the first thing you need to ask yourself is my standard or my thought of what love is, am I even right on that initial thought? You know, like we all come in with our assumptions, we all come in with our personal experiences, and that is like these lenses that are on our eyes as we perceive the world. And the reality is we need to recognize that we need to put in a corrective lens when we look at things, because otherwise everyone's going to look at the same passage. It happens in Christianity all the time. It happens in the world all the time. People read the same thing and come to different conclusions. And it's usually because they're taking their personal experience which has that cultural lens, that experiential lens, and they're seeing the text differently. And the question is, how do we correctively adjust that? Because we can't remove these lenses. They're
It's
there.
your personal experience.
Yeah, it's your personal experience. So how do we correct it so we can see it clearly for what it was meant to be, what it originally was intended to be? So when we're talking about love, what is love? Is love a romantic relationship? Is love a friendship? Is love a relationship between a father and a son, or a mother and a daughter? Is love all of them? Like, what is love? What are the characteristics of love? And once we start to talk about that, we can get a better picture, and then look at scripture and say, okay, now that we see that this is what love is, let's see what this means, how God loves us, and how we're, asking ourselves, how do we love in this way?
Right. And one thing that I've noticed is that a lot of people are taught, and I'm not saying that it's right or that it's wrong, but because I want to be respectful of everyone's ideas and everyone's beliefs. However, I do want to sort of shake the tree so that we can, so the things that aren't really clinging on to truth can loosen and fall to the ground, so we can really see what's at the core of it. But a lot of people are taught that so, for example, if I have never been shown any kindness ever in my life, and I don't know what love is, and I'm told by someone who's religious that God loves me because he died for me, there's a sense of guilt to that. There's like a sense of like I owe him, and so we learn that love means sacrifice, obviously, right? But there's also this thing like that now you're indebted. But my understanding, okay, because at least that was my understanding previously, and now my understanding is different, because there was already debt before, and what I'm learning is that the debt was paid, so there's no more debt, right?
Yeah.
But can you clarify that just a tiny little bit more? If that's possible. We have a whole day if you want.
I am fine with that. I have a long time, and I'd be more than happy to sit on here and talk to you all day, Leonardo. So yeah, no, that's a great question. I think that this is where it comes down to, again, when I was talking about these lenses, right? We're looking at the Bible from a 21st century postmodern lens, right? And then whatever state we're in, whatever political background we have, whatever raising we have, right? We have all these lenses. And we have to realize that when these words were being said, like actually said, not even written, when they were being said by Christ, when they were being done and acted out, they were done in a completely different cultural lens, a completely different time. So when we're looking at this question that you asked about Jesus' sacrifice, right? Yes, love is sacrifice. Love is selfless. I say that all the time. Love is selfless. It's not self. It's not interested in self. It's interested in others above themselves. So when you talk about Jesus' death and resurrection, when you talk about his death on the cross for us, yes, that was a sacrifice to pay the penalty of sin. That debt is 100% paid. It's done. But here's the thing, the imagery that we miss. You see, when you look at Revelation and you see where this is headed, the church, this is again, biblically speaking, the church is the future bride of Christ. Jesus is the future bridegroom, or the groom, as we say in the world today. Jesus was basically, by his sacrifice, was paying a dowry. And he was saying, I want you to be my bride. I want you to enter into an intimate relationship with me. And this is also where we need to take away how we view relationships and how they used to view relationships, because that's also very important. You see, in today's world, like, the guy goes out, he buys a ring, they get engaged, they may or may not, already be having sex in a relationship, whatever it be. And then a couple days, sometimes a month, sometimes not as often, but sometimes a year later, they go in and get married. And they have this ceremony. Sort of the same thing, but different back then. There was this betrothal, all right? And that betrothal is when you gave the dowry. But here's the thing, the betrothal, everyone for some reason gets this mixed up when it comes to like arranged marriages and stuff. Because yes, there was a lot of talk of arrangement back in those days. They were married a lot younger. But here's the thing that people miss. When they gave that dowry, the bride, the future bride, had to accept. It couldn't just be well, my parents have put this together, so that's it. The future bride had to accept the dowry along with the parents. And this idea is, and this is the other thing, after they were then betrothed, there was a period of time. There's no set time, but it usually was between 6 months to a year-ish, where there was no consummation of the marriage. There was nothing. They weren't officially married yet. They were betrothed. So what it was saying is, you are taken. You cannot be with other people. You are tied to this person. And then the wedding ceremony would happen. And the reason why that's important is we are now living, this is from the Christian standpoint, we are now living in this in-between time. Jesus has placed his dowry. And now we have this in-between time where we are choosing to accept or reject that dowry. And then he will come again, and we will then be united if we've accepted. And that's the beauty of the imagery of what's happening there. This love is more than just, I'm going to pay your debt. This love is, I want to spend an eternity in this intimate relationship with you because I love you. And I have a feeling we're going to talk about the lyrics in a little bit, but that's, I think, where Corey got that idea of reckless, is the idea that this husband, this God, Jesus, was willing to say, I'm willing to lay my life down to pay this dowry, to pay this debt that is like, and here's the thing, think about this, Leonardo, and think about this, viewers. He paid it while we still hadn't said yes.
Ooh.
He paid it before we even said yes.
Okay.
He said, that's how much I love you.
Break that down for me. What does that mean for?
Yeah. So he's saying, I'm going to, like, it's one thing to be like, hey, here's a ring. Oh, you said no. Okay, I'll go take it back. He died. He literally hung on a cross, paid a thief's death. It actually in those days was a curse. It was considered a curse to be hung on a cross, to be hung on a tree. And he took that, he basically bore that curse. He bore that sin, and he said, I will die for you even before you love me, to show how vast my love is for you, my creation, my love, my future bride. That's how much his love is. And it's actually interesting, Leonardo, because a lot of people don't realize this. This wasn't like a spur of the moment, okay, man sinned, let's make a change.
Yeah.
This was planned all the way in Genesis, all the way at the beginning of the Bible. The very first covenant with man was God and Abram before he was renamed Abraham. And they did this covenant. And Abram had to take a couple like sheep and goats and stuff and cut them in half, place them on either side, they make an aisle, take two birds, kill them, put them on the other side, on each side. And then God and man made a covenant. God saying, I will be your God and you will be my people. I will bless you. I will take care of you. I will be there for you always. And this side, Abram's side, saying, I will follow you the rest of my days. And what would happen is that ancient ceremony, which was a ceremony that was done back in those days, basically both parties would walk through. And what you're saying is, if I break this covenant, let me become like these animals, beaten, bruised, destroyed, and killed.
That was going to be my question. Like, why the violence towards animals? But you just answered that. You just answered that.
Yeah, violence towards animals. I think that's where, you know, when you look back at creation and you look back at when, like, and this is, you know, again, biblical standpoint, when you look back at Genesis and you look at creation, God created man and did something different than the animals.
Right.
He created man in his image, in his likeness. And it actually says why. It says so that they may rule. All right. That is from the very beginning.
So
God
has already
rule, R-U-L-E.
Rule. Yeah.
Rule.
Okay. Gotcha.
So they may rule over the beasts of the earth and the birds of the air. So there's something different about animals and us. Now, look, I have 2 dogs. I love pets. I love animals. I'm not saying let's go kill animals by any means. Right. I'm not saying that. I'm saying there, you know, the recognition is there is something different between us. Obviously, in today's world, science would have you believe otherwise. They would say we're exactly the same. You know, we don't have anything different. But from a religious standpoint, I believe we do. But really quick, to finish what I was saying, God puts Abram to sleep and walks through himself in that covenant. And what God is saying is, from the very beginning, the very first covenant with man, God said, I'm going to pay that penalty, not you. I will pay it for you because I know you can't uphold it. You're not going to uphold it. And Israel didn't uphold it throughout the Bible. You saw it all the time. And God said, I will pay it. That's the love that came from God, is he said, I will pay from the very beginning. I know you're going to fail. I know you're going to mess up, and I'm going to do it anyway because of my love for you, my creation, the one which I love. So,
That's wonderful. That's awesome, man. That's great. Thank you for breaking that down and answering that. So, what does a ceremony like that look like in today's society?
Yeah, I think that so you're talking about the covenant thing.
Yeah.
I think today it's more of the debt of sin has been paid. So now the question is, if the debt of sin has been paid, and therefore there is no need for this sacrificial type of thing.
Yeah.
The sacrifice has been paid. It actually says in the Bible, Jesus died to sin once for all. Right? It's done. Now the question is, what does that look like? I think it's an inward act. It's this idea of, I'm willing to be set apart, right? I'm willing to live to different standards. I'm willing to live to the standards that God places on my life. And that standard is I don't want to say against, but it's usually diametrically opposed to culture. You're set apart for something else. It's exactly what God did with the Jews. He said, I want you to be set apart to be an example to the nations. And it's the same thing for us. As Christians, we're called to be set apart to be an example to the people around us. I always say to everyone, I say, look, missions and sharing the gospel isn't necessarily handing out a tract or preaching. It's spreading the love of God in every interaction that you have, whether that be a smile or that be a, hey, I want to be your friend, I want to talk to you. Like, that's what it means. It all comes back to this idea of love. And that's actually where it all started, was love.
Right,
so
right.
Ideally, it would go back to love. If you're right, I mean, think about any Hollywood film script, right? It starts in one place, usually a bad place, and then gets better. This starts in a great place. And then all of a sudden, we mess it up, and then we have to bring it back to where it was. And that's, yeah.
Awesome. I love that. I really, really love that. I love that particularly because you said it's about going inwardly. It's an inward thing now.
Yeah.
That's great. So if you don't mind, let's take a look at the lyrics here, and we're just going to break them down. Thanks to our wonderful technology here, we're able to do this. All right. So this is the video that I've gotten the most, I don't want to say controversial because it's not really that. It's just so like broad answers, and I understand that there's so many denominations that so many people look at it differently, and some people don't like this word reckless. They don't like to think of God as someone who is reckless, right? But in that video, I think Corey very carefully, in my opinion, very carefully explained that he wasn't calling God reckless, that he was just saying that the way in which he loves may seem reckless. And I think I know what he meant, but I wanted to talk to you about it real quickly. So we'll just go through this kind of fairly quickly. So a lot of it is, hey, you've been so kind to me. You've been so good to me. So it says it starts off with, before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. Right? Man, before I took a breath, you breathe your life into me, right? And so there's something about God doing something before I existed, or before I even started speaking. You spoke over me. Now, what do you, looking at this first line here, why do you think that's important for someone to say?
I mean, that's literally speaking on what we just talked about. It's basically a poetic way of saying, before I spoke a word or took a breath, before I was even in existence, you were loving me infinitely, and you created me, and that love came out. And the next verse, if you don't mind, I don't mind, before we hit the chorus, because I think it starts with creation. Before anything, you made me out of love, and you made me with purpose, right? And then you get to, when I was your foe, still your love fought for me. And when I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. And what he's saying is, look, when I was against you, you died for me. Like, I wasn't even for you. I wasn't even on the same team as you. I was against you. And you said, I don't care, because I love you. I created you out of love. I died for you out of love. And this love, and this is where we get to that, and stop me if I'm taking all this stuff up, but this is where that reckless comes in. Because if you were to look at any relationship in the world today, and you were to, like, honestly, if you think about man's relationship with God, it's toxic. Man is toxic towards God. Man, it's a toxic relationship. And in the world today, you enter into a toxic relationship where someone's just taking, and never giving anything back. What do you tell that person? What do you tell them?
Like, bruh, come on.
Get out of it. Like, get out.
Yeah.
What are you doing? But God leans into that. That's why it's reckless. He's saying, look, I don't care what it costs me. I'm going to die for you.
Yeah.
And it's actually really interesting, because when you look at, like, and this is the imagery of the Bible, in the book of Hosea, the prophet Hosea, it's a really amazing book, but it's this imagery of God and Israel. And Hosea is called to marry this prostitute, which is like already an issue in the Jewish culture. But the fact is, God calls him to do it, and he continually pursues this prostitute over and over. She continually leaves him and continually cheats on him. And she, at the end, it's basically like, why? And the idea is this: Israel, when we go back in the Old Testament, was continually, in God's terms, sorry if this is going to be flagged or anything for this, but whoring themselves out to the other nations, was worshiping other gods, was being tainted by the things around them, and was no longer serving God. But God continually pursued, even through all of that. And that's the idea, is that this love is so reckless. If someone leaves you in today's world, you go, all right, moving on, right? God goes, no, I'm not moving on. I'm going to keep loving you and keep chasing after you, because of that immense love. And that's why Corey uses the word reckless, because it's not reckless in regards to, like, not regarding other people. It's reckless in regards to not regarding himself, and being willing to let go of everything.
Yeah, that's what I took. I actually made a short clip where I described that it's not so much that God is being called reckless here, is that I get myself into reckless situations, and that God has to go through all these reckless things that I've put myself through, climbing mountains, knocking down walls, and all the other that these lyrics say that. From my perspective, it's like that's reckless. That, like, you love me recklessly because I got myself in a reckless situation.
Yep.
And yet you're like plowing through all of that, right? And so it's not, you're reckless because nothing's going to happen to you. I mean, you're God, nothing's going to really happen to you, right? but you're the way in which you love appears that way. At least that's
yeah. I agree with you 100% on that. And so you were talking about the bridge lyrics here. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. No wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. And here's the caveat that I add to that, because, and as a Christian, this song, I get where Corey's coming from. I also, wish there were some different lyrics to be a little more theologically sound, but I see where he's coming from. But that particular part, this is my caveat. He's going to light up every shadow, climb up every mountain, kick down every wall. But at the end of the day, it's up to you to accept. You see what I'm saying? Like, that's also a showing of reckless. It's not like it's a done deal. I chase them, they will be mine. It's, I chase them, they might even reject me at the very end. Like, that just shows you the level of this love. A level of love that, if we're honest, Leonardo, man, just we can't compare to that level. That level is so beyond where we are at. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't love. That doesn't mean that we can't see aspects of that love in our relationships. It just means that level of love is so selfless, is so sacrificial, that it's willing to literally go to death for people that may ultimately say no.
What would it take for a human being to be selfless?
Ooh, that's a deep question. What would it take?
I did say, why can't we dive deep into our hearts, is what I said in the video, right? And love. And you know what? Honestly, I realize that sometimes language is tricky, because we, as you said earlier, you know, especially with like lyrics, especially if something is done poetically or artistically, it's completely up to the listener to sort of reinterpret that for themselves, right?
Yeah, definitely.
But I said, why can't we? And what I meant, probably now in retrospect, is why won't we? Why won't we dive deep into our hearts? And the thing is, honestly, it's because I said it in the video. I said this. I said, like, your music is beautiful. Your stories are beautiful. So I'm talking to the Christian here, you know, from those days, my non-Christian perspective. I'm like, your music is beautiful. You have beautiful music with beautiful lyrics, with beautiful stories in it, and you're loved in this huge way. Why won't we? Why won't you? If you know this love, if you understand this love, if your answer to this question is we can't love this way unless we have God, and yet you claim that you are, and I'm not throwing casting stones, okay? But if we claim if we claim to know this love, why won't we let it overflow out of our hearts and into other people's lives?
And that's where my comment comes in, because we get distracted by the things of this world. And as I mentioned, and as you even mentioned, that love, you know, from my personal perspective and my religious perspective and my own ideas here, and I think a lot of people would agree with me, that love can only come from God. So if you're not in that relationship with God and growing that relationship, you're not going to see that love. Because let's be honest, what does the culture tell us about how we should live our lives? It keeps saying it's all about you. It's all about you. It's about you, you know, whether it be pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, or even to the point where sometimes even in today's culture, they go, you deserve it, right? It's all about you. You deserve it. You deserve everything. And that starts from self. When love starts from selfless, it's the wrong foundation, right? The foundation needs to start at the right spot. It's just like if I were to say I'm going to build a house, and I start building that house on a beach, and I don't pour a proper foundation, the second a big storm comes in, my house is going to start sinking, right? I need to start with the right foundation. So if we're starting with self, then we're not going to see that kind of love produced. It's just not going to happen. Again, that seed thing that we were talking about, right? I sowed that seed. I start with that wrong foundation. The fruit that's going to come is not going to be what I was looking for, right? It's just it's not going to happen.
You know, one of the things that I pick up right now as you were saying that is, in yesterday's video, on Tuesday's video, on Tuesday's video, we broke down the lyrics to a song by Matthew West, and the conversation was getting really good with all the viewers, and I mentioned just what you just said about building your house, and we were talking about free will, and what I said was that if I was given, for me, and this is my personal experience, that when I was given free will, I tried to live the life my way with my plans, you know, wanting the things that I wanted. So starting from the self, as you said, right? But I had no blueprint for what I was building, and so what I did was I came back around, and I came to God, and I said, well, my plans suck. Right, for the lack of a better phrase here, my plans suck. Let's try your plans. Let's try your ways. I surrender my way, and I'm going to give you back this thing that you gave me, this gift that you gave me. I don't want it. It's actually a curse, if you will, right? But and this is what you're saying is we start off with the self being the sand, and God or Christ being the rock on which you you build your life on. And one thing that I've noticed that I picked up is that the self is always changing. The self always changes. It's like sand, right? So it's hard now, but when the water comes and comes back, it changes its substance, right? And so it becomes weaker. So the self is always changing. We spoke yesterday about how God is never changing. It's solid. It always is from the beginning to end, and always will be that stable foundation, right? And so building on that. Anyway, I just wanted to point
no,
that out.
that is, for anyone who's watching that, Leonardo just got something from God there, because that is literally perfect. Like, seriously, the your self changes, sand changes, like, it's perfect. That imagery, by the way, I'm stealing that from you now. But that's fantastic.
It's not mine anyway. Yeah, I'm really enjoying this conversation, man. So coming back to reckless love, and a lot of people don't like that, I feel, because they have an image that God is absolutely perfect, and that image is correct. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's absolutely correct. I feel like they're coming up to defend something that doesn't need defending.
Yeah, I think so. For me personally, so I'm actually wearing a shirt that says Reckless Love on it. It was from a missions trip that we did to Houston, Texas for Hurricane Harvey relief, and they did a whole entire week on Reckless Love, and that was the theme song. And they were talking about what does it mean to love recklessly, and really put it into perspective for me. And that's when I started, singing the song a little bit more. But there are definitely, I think what it comes down to is when you are singing a worship song, as you mentioned, right? It's up to the interpretation of the person, right? Like, at the end of the day, someone might interpret that differently. And I think that's where some Christians get a little hesitant, is because even though the worship leader may say, this is what it means, and they go, oh, okay, I can get behind that. The problem is, how does that look out facing to someone else who doesn't have that context, right? Luckily, in the video we watched, in the video you reacted to, Corey brought that up. Right. But not everyone who listens to the song on the radio is going to have that context, right? Context is everything. So they're not going to have that context. And I think that's where a lot of Christians and some pastors go, we just don't want to, they say we don't want to sing the song, or we don't want to do it just because, there's ambiguity there that someone could misunderstand what's happening. But at the end of the day, if we're honest, everything can be misunderstood.
Right.
So,
yeah, absolutely right. There was this exercise that I did when I was working at a print shop, and it was saying how important it is to make sure that your wording is correct. And they had this thing that said, I didn't say that she stole your money. And it says everyone's going to interpret that differently depending on what word they emphasize. So it says, I didn't say she stole your money, which means I didn't say it, she said it, or he said it, right? Or I didn't say she stole your money, I implied it, or I wrote it down, right? I didn't say she stole your money, it was him, or it was that other person, right? I didn't say she stole your money, she borrowed it, she promised she was going to put it back, or whatever. I didn't say she stole your money, it was his money he stole. So every single time you emphasize each word, it's a completely different sentence, right?
And Leonardo, you just hit on something so important that I think is going to launch us into this next rabbit hole. This is the problem with technology. When we text and we email and we comment, there's no emphasis. There's no body language. And so it lends itself to such high degrees of misinterpretation that people then get offended or upset, and then all of a sudden you just find these seeds of disunity being sown from things that were not intended to be anything bad. It's just people misunderstand and miscommunicate and misrepresent each other because they look at something and go, oh, I immediately assume, we talked about this the other day, I immediately assume that you then believe this, or I immediately assume that you are this. And the second we do that, look at our country. It's so polarized. I'm not just talking politically. I'm talking just in general. We are so polarized. And the reality is, and this is, I brought this up before with, and sorry, you're probably going to have to now link this in there, but with what Jordan Peterson said before, he talks about how men and women, when he's talking, obviously he's not talking about what we're talking about, but men and women are very similar. All right. If you were to take out of 100 people, you were to take and say, like, this man is aggressive, you'd be right 60% of the time, because women are 40% aggressive and men are, out of 100, 60% of men are in the usual average. But when you go to the extreme and you go to the most aggressive people, all 100 are men. And it's this idea of, we've literally taken things in politics, we've taken things in life, and we've taken things in demographics, and we said, you know, the reality is we're here, but we're being shown through media and through the world that we're all this far apart. And the reality is we're not this far apart. We're all right here. The extremes are this far apart, but the extremes aren't the norm. You're looking at like 1-2%, not 98%. And that's where we miss each other. And we just fly right past each other in conversation. And then this is the problem that I find. We do the most unloving thing ever, and we just block someone and get rid of them, right? We say, I don't want to talk to you because you disagree with me. And this is the problem I have. This is the problem I have with youth, Leonardo. And this is why, you know, Leonardo asked me before this, he's like, what's your social media thing so I can get people to check you out? I'm like, I got rid of my social media. I got rid of all of it. And it's because of what I've seen with youth. And Daniel Kahneman wrote in his book, Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. He's a psychiatrist. He said, the problem is in today's day and age, we have this illusion of validity. And what he means by that is because of social media, and because, think about this for a second, you get to choose your friends on social media. That's great. You know, initially it was a great idea, get to connect people. But when you get to choose and pick who you talk to, and ask any youth this, they'll all say the same thing. Someone says something you disagree with, rather than engaging in that conversation and trying to understand where they're coming from, you just block them, get rid of them. All right, done. So then you surround yourself in this echo chamber of only people who agree with your viewpoints. And then you get into the real world where there isn't that ability to just block someone. And so you go, I don't want to talk to you. No, you're this. And you start labeling them as this extreme left or right group because you don't want to address the issues. And this is that illusion of validity.
Well, you know, you just made a point, because I've been reading a book by Jordan Peterson. I've got the 12 Rules of Life.
I have it too.
Yeah. Sent it. Well, we should totally talk about it, because there's some things that I'm like, what? Yes. That just means that we're gonna have another conversation.
Sounds good.
So, and then quick shout out to Mama Bear, because she someone who follows the channel. She's our Mama Bear. That's what she
love it.
We've accepted her as our Mama Bear. She sent me not just this pillow, but she's the one that actually gifted me the book. But in one of the first, I think it was the first rule, Jordan Peterson talks about a feedback loop, kind of like when you're in a mic, you know, and it just goes with what you just said. So you're in a mic, and sometimes your mic will be amplified so loudly that it'll pick up your own sound from the speaker, and it'll be fed back into the mic, and it'll creates like this loop, and that's where you hear like this echo, and you call it an echo chamber, and it loops this echo, and then it gets louder and amplifies even more, you know, more so. And he was talking just about what you just said, where you know, he didn't say specifically youth, but you're absolutely right. They lock themselves into what we lock ourselves into. I don't want to just signal them out, but we as humans, we lock ourselves into the group that we are identifying with, right? And we block anyone that we do not identify with. And so I want to talk a little bit about identity here with you, because when we talk about relationships, we talk about how we identify with someone, what we have in common, right? And so sometimes we spoke about this the other day, we draw a line, and that line sort of divides us. Now, a lot of people I've heard some people say, well, God didn't come to bring unity. He brought the sword, and the sword is to divide us. And so that we use scripture to sort of, you know, push an idea, a specific idea. But all of that aside, all contradiction aside, and all of that, I just want to speak to you about identity, because a lot of youth today, I feel they're really struggling to identify with something, and they cannot find that identity. I mean, they're looking online, and there's just too much information for them to latch onto. And as parents who work or we're extremely busy, and that's not an excuse because we should also be involved in our kids' lives. It's very challenging to see where our children are, what our children are attaching themselves to, and how their identity are identifying what they're identifying with. Anyway, I could go on. I could go on and on and on into this little, but let's just leave it at the surface level here.
Yeah. So actually, right before we get there, hold that thought for 2 seconds, because you brought up this idea of some people saying that Christ came to bring unity and some saying Christ came to bring a sword and disunity. And that is like, both statements are true, except there's a misunderstanding of that latter, right? When Christ said, I've come to divide, what he was saying is, I have come to divide mother and father and brother and sister and family. And what he's saying by that is, when you come to saving knowledge of me, your perspective changes. And when that happens, the people who may even be the closest to you start to move away from you. And that's what he was saying. He's saying, I've come to divide in that way, not to divide to bring disunity among people. I've come to say, come to saving knowledge of me. The problem is, when you do so, you might be persecuted by the ones that you love because they disagree with the viewpoints that you're now holding. It's not to say he's come to destroy that. When people say that, I think of like certain churches and I go, man, like, really, is that what you're preaching? Like, because that's just a horrible representation. It's dangerous.
It's a little dangerous because I remember seeing some kind of documentary on I hate to bring this word up, but cults. There were some people that were using that specific line to tell them, hey, see what Christ is saying is you need to stop talking to your parents. And they would get youngsters and take them, and so parents would file like this like missing person thing, and would just like trap them. So being very careful not to fall into things like that, right? And I think one important thing, if you're watching this, like, because I know that the channel has attracted this channel specifically has attracted people who are also walking a path where the church may have like hurt them, and they're comfortable on the channel because we are about spreading love, and I truly mean that, and I'm very careful with the things that I say and do here because of that. But if you're watching this, I think the most important thing that you should ask is does this is this with love? Is this because Christ? We know that Christ is love, right?
Yeah,
paid the ultimate price, sacrificed out of that love. And so when he says something like, "I've come to bring a sword to divide," you have to really take your time to analyze that and break that down and ask yourself, like, how can he have meant this with love? Because even as a non-Christian, I understood that he meant that, like, that following him was going to make people go, you're one of those Christians now, and that was going to create a division, and since Christ had this habit, and I mean that sort of like cute here. I'm trying to be cute. He had this habit of speaking in parables, and speaking in sort of code. You have to take that into account. Anyway, continue.
So no, you just said something really important there. We need to understand what love is. So let's start there. Let's go ahead and start there. What is love? We've said love is selfless. Love is sacrifice, right? But let's go ahead and get deeper, and let's even go philosophically. Like, let's not even, because I could go here and go to 1 Corinthians and say love is patient, love is kind, love is envy. No, let's not go into that. Let's go into a philosophical approach. All right. So love is built. I always say love is time spent. Okay. Love is time spent. The more time that you spend with someone, the more your love relationship with them grows, whether it be a friendship or a romantic relationship or a family relationship, whatever it is. Love is time spent. So love is found in relationship. Okay. Relationships are built on unity. We talked about this in the beginning a little bit, right? You are unified under something, some sort of thing that brings you together, whether it be we're on the same baseball team, or we like the same cars, or we like the same food, whatever it is. We live on the same block, right? You have some sort of unity. And as your relationship grows, that unity gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Now let's ask the very important question. What is unity built off of? Unity is built off of truth. That's a key. Unity is built off of truth. You don't build unity off of falsehood. You build unity off of truth. You both agree on something, and therefore you have unity. And that's when it comes down to the issue when we're talking about foundation. Because we, as a Christian, I believe God is truth, right? If you believe in God, you can't say that there is no truth, right? Because if God created all things, then he is the universal truth that is there. That would be your framework, your worldview, if you will. Now take the other side where we live today. We live in this postmodern world. This idea that there is no universal truth, no universal good, no universal wrong, no universal right. That's where we live in right now. And if you don't know that, people who are watching, go ahead, look up the definition of postmodernism and what it's about. This idea of no universal truth. So you're already starting with a completely different foundation, right? Your foundation is built off of no truth. I would argue that's ungodliness, all right? But no truth. The second you start with no truth, you're not going to have unity. You're going to have the opposite. You're going to have disunity. And what happens when you have disunity? You don't have relationships. At best, you have broken relationships. The reality is you have no relationship. And what happens when you have no relationship? You have hatred. You don't have love. And that's what we're looking at today. So when we look at love, we need to realize that love is firmly rooted in unity, relationships, and truth, and in God. And that's the crux. Which foundation are you using? I'll let you respond to that because I know that's a deep one.
that is simmering here with me. I'm a dive deep type of person, and the first thing that I want to dive a little deeper into with regards to that is the word relationship.
Yeah.
How do we relate to the other person? You just said that we start off that relationship based on unity, what unites us. But the danger sometimes is that, okay, you and I like the same things. So for example, the thing that we just found in common is reckless love and Jordan Peterson, right? So we're talking about Jordan Peterson, but at some point I'm not relating to you. At some point it becomes that I depend on you.
Okay. Yeah. I see what you're saying. I would say it doesn't start with unity. It actually starts the inverse. It starts with love. Your relationships start with love. Your love needs to be firmly rooted in God, which leads to truth, which leads to unity with God, a relationship with God, which then brings that love out. And when that love comes out, you then can reach out to someone you don't have a relationship with, love them, and then build a relationship and build that unity and build that truth and build that firm foundation. That's what I'm trying to say. It needs to start with you first. It's a perfect example of, like, I don't want to say which came first, chicken or the egg, because I don't want to get into that whole conversation. But it gets into this idea of, like, how can you, Leonardo, how can you pour out to someone if you're not pouring in, right? If you're not full, you can't pour out. So if I'm not filled with the love of God and I'm not firmly rooted in his truth, how am I supposed to pour out to other people?
Okay. All right. Now we're cooking with grease.
Yeah, let's go.
All right. Okay. See. So that's exactly it. Okay. So we have a relationship. So I love Jordan Peterson. You love something about Jordan Peterson, right? And we come together and we're like, hey, we both love Jordan Peterson. So we're having a conversation and we're talking about that. So we're building a relationship based around that, right? But at some point, it's your responsibility to take care of you, make sure that you grow. And it's my responsibility to take care of me, that I grow, so that what I bring into the relationship is actually nurturing the relationship and not damaging the relationship.
Yes.
I follow you.
I would even go a further step, Leonardo. As our relationship grows, as love is time spent. The more time we spend together, the more we continue to grow in this friendship, love together. The more we build that relationship, the more then we get into one of the biggest fallacies with love. I have heard so many people say love is acceptance. And I'm here to say, and chat, hear me out before you turn off, right? Love is not acceptance. Let me explain what I mean by that. If me and Leonardo are in a good relationship and we're building that relationship and we're pouring into each other ourselves, And then all of a sudden, let's say Leonardo starts doing something that's detrimental to himself or our relationship or other people. If I truly love him, I'm not going to say, well, I accept the way he is, and I'm just going to let him do it. I'm going to bring it up. I'm going to confront him and say, bro, I care about you enough to say what you're doing is detrimental to not only our relationship, but yourself and other people, right? And this is where the problem comes in. This idea of, I have the right to not be offended, and therefore love is all about accepting me for who I am and everything that I do, even if what I'm doing is detrimental to myself and other people. And I go, no, love goes out and says, I will have the tough conversation because I care. I tell parents this all the time. You know, there's the epidemic in the world today. Leonard Sachs wrote a book called The Collapse of Parenting. There's this epidemic in the world today where parents are not parenting their children. They're just like, oh, I'll just be their friend and I'll let them do what they want. And the Bible specifically speaks on this. It says, a father who spares the rod hates his children, but a father who loves his children is careful to discipline them. Now, I'm not saying you have to go spank your kids. All right, that's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. What I'm saying is discipline and confrontation in a friendship relationship is essential to love. You can't have love without it, because what is the message you're sending? Leonardo, if you're living a life that is detrimental to yourself and our relationship, and I say nothing, what I'm non-verbally communicating to you is, I couldn't care less.
Right. And if you cared about me.
If I love you, I care about you, which means I'm going to actually be invested in your life and invested in how you live and really care when you do something that's detrimental. Let that sit for a little bit.
Right. Yeah, I did. I just did. And it brought me to this. That one of the things that's important about what you just said is that I have to care about me enough to be able to take what you just said about how I'm living my life and change what I'm doing. Because if I didn't, if I cared about something else, if, like what we're talking about distraction, if I was distracted and cared about something else, then I would walk away from this relationship. I would block you in life. Because now you're hurting. Now you're saying, now you're judging me. Now you're shining the light in what I'm doing. I don't like that. So I'm going to block you from life because I don't want to talk to you. Don't talk to me because, you know, and in essence, what that tells me is that I don't care about myself. I don't care to grow. I just want to do me. And I just want to throw out one thing you said. It started off with selfishness, and the world society says that that you should care about you and you. And I just want to point out that that's why I'm going to start another argument here. This is why I have an Android, because I have a problem with the iPhone, iPod, iPad, I'm just kidding.
Oh, now you're going to convict me, man.
So now Apple is the devil. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, goodness.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Let's not go there. Familia, you are loved, good. Even if you have an iPhone. But anyway, okay. So going back to loving yourself, right? I dropped the non-Christian title, right? I dropped the non-Christian title. And one of the reasons why I was hesitating dropping this title was because I was worried about what other people were going to think of me. I pointed out to you in our conversation the other day that if I call myself anything, even with the simplest things, if I say to someone, hey, yeah, I'm Mexican, depending on what your personal experience is with Mexicans, you're gonna bring that to the table, and you're going to take that experience, whether it's a good or positive. I hope it's positive. You know, tacos. Shout out to tacos out there.
Yeah,
we'll have that question too. I hope that it's positive. But if you had a negative experience with someone who's Mexican, you're likely going to put me in that category, and you're probably going to see me as someone like that, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't want to call myself a Christian per se. I wasn't ready to call myself a Christian, because there's also, there's all kinds of Christians. There's very sort of Mother Teresa like Christians, and there's also Westboro, and,
yeah, exactly.
But I'm sorry, to make a long story longer, I dropped the non-Christian title, and now I'm calling myself a student of Christ, because it started with Christ. It didn't start with Christianity. It didn't start with Christianity. It started with Christ, right? And so studying what Christ said, I come to these two important rules or laws that he pointed to, that said that if you abide by these two laws, the rest of the laws would be taken care of, right?
Yep.
It's like the umbrella for these other rules that you've been instructed. And that is, one, to love God with your heart, mind, with all your heart, mind, and soul, right? And the second is to love your neighbor as yourself. And I say that in almost at the end of every video, is love your neighbor as yourself. And I want to talk about this a little bit because we were talking about relationships. Okay, now look, I love that. I end every video with, please remember to love your neighbor as yourself, because I think that's really important right now. This is incredibly important. I think I honestly, and I don't mean that, well, forget it. I'm not going to censor myself. I believe that it is my personal mission to remind people of this. I've made it my personal mission to remind people to love your neighbor. And I say this at the end of every video: continue to spread the love that comes from above. So the first one is already taken care of. You received the love that comes from God, and you and you reflect that love back by loving God back with your mind, with all your heart, mind, and soul. And the second is to love your neighbor as yourself. But I feel like you're supposed to read between the lines, like there's a third one there that's kind of missing. Not missing intentionally. I'm not saying that Jesus forgot or anything, but that we were supposed to dive deep into this. And that is, love yourself.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I would agree with you 100% that I would say it's not even that it's missing, it's that it's implied. You know, if you're receiving the love of God, then you're receiving the truth that comes from God, which is you are perfect in his sight, that you are created in his image, and that you are his masterpiece. And if you truly believe that, you're going to love yourself, right? And I think that's what it comes down to. Now, with the love your neighbor as yourself, this is actually really a great. I actually just preached on this a couple of weeks ago with the youth. It comes from Matthew, and when you look at that passage, you have to look at what the problem was. You see, the Jewish leaders of the time, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, were interpreting a law that was in the law in the Old Testament. All right. And it said, basically, I'm paraphrasing right now because I don't have it in front of me and I don't feel like rustling through a ton of pages on a podcast. But basically what it said was, you know, those who are of you, make sure you love those who are of you. You need to love them. All right. And as I have commanded, love your neighbor as yourself. What the Jewish people did in that time, though, is they then implied, they imparted a fallacy. They then implied the opposite then also has to be true. So even though God said, those who are of you, you need to be united and you need to love each other as I've told you, love your neighbor as yourself. He's saying, I need you to love each other. They go, oh, so then we have to hate our enemy. That's what they believed. So when Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself, there's another passage where the teacher comes up and says, teacher, like, what does it mean to love thy neighbor? And Jesus brings up the parable of the Good Samaritan. And he talks about how this man was beaten, bruised, and and left on the road for dead. And a priest and a Levite walk by. Two Jews walk right by him, who should be considering them his neighbor, their neighbor, because he's a Jew. But then a Samaritan, the enemy, if you will, of Jewish people, is the one who loves him and takes care of him. And not only takes care of him, then also comes back the next day to give the innkeeper more coins for anything else that's needed. And this idea is Jesus is saying, you have started with an improper view that your neighbor is only those who are of you. Rather, I tell you, your neighbor is everyone. Everyone is your neighbor. You are called to love everyone. And that's why he says later, you have heard it said, love your neighbor, hate your enemy. I tell you, love your enemy. So think about that. And if you think about it, that's what Jesus did. When he died on the cross, he died for enemies. He died for people who did not love him, were not for him. That's the love we're talking about here. A love that is so selfless. It's willing to do that.
I get the word all inclusive.
Yeah.
Right? his love is all inclusive. He didn't say, yeah, he even, it's crazy, but he even died for the one who betrayed him, and he knew he was going to be betrayed. And I point that out, and I point that out often because I think it's a part of the story that really stood out to me, that really clicked in me and made me want to study him even more. Was that it was this idea that he knew that was Judas, right?
Judas Iscariot,
was going to betray him. He knew this.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of locking him out in the Last Supper, he prepared a spot for him on the table.
You know, it's even better, Leonardo. He knew he was going to do it according to the scripture all the way back in like Matthew 15, which technically chronologically comes after Matthew 8, which is way before the Last Supper. Like, he knew from the beginning that Judas Iscariot was going to betray him. And he said, I know, but I love him. And that's why he even says, it's really funny because if you haven't read the Bible, basically what happens here is Jesus says to Judas, after he basically says, all of you now eating of the bread and drinking of this cup, which is the Last Supper, right? You've now taken this communion, the first communion, right? And he says, but one of you is to betray me. And he turns to Judas and says, go and do what you must do.
Wow.
He doesn't, he literally just goes, go do it, because this is what you need to do. Like, you're going to do it, do it. And he's like, I still love you. I still love you, even though you're doing this. The response from Judas is afterwards, he's so filled with distraught of what he had done, he hangs himself. And it's one of these things where it's like, love that is, God's love is so great. Like, I can't even, like, think about it, Leonardo. When's the last time you've been in a relationship and someone's treated you like dirt, and you've been like, you know what? I'm going to love them anyway. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's very hard. Sometimes when we have family, we just put up with it. We put up with it sometimes more than like actually having that kind of love. And it's just, if we're honest, the bar is so high right now with God's love that it's like, yeah, bro, that's like, there's no way. without God, there's no way I can get there. It's just not going to happen, because it's so great.
Yeah.
It's unfathomable.
Yeah. And you know, just then when you pointed out that he hung himself, like I got a little sad. Like, I kind of went into that mind space, and I thought, I said mind space, not my space, not to be confused. My space.
Oh gosh.
Follow me on MySpace, everyone. I'll give you the handle afterwards. I'm just kidding.
You still have your MySpace account?
No. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But I know some people who still have an AOL account. Their AOL email. But no, just in that moment, I thought of putting myself in that situation where it's just like, what have I done? Like, what did I just do? I just completely, I completely betrayed this person who was nothing but kind to me. I completely turned away from this person who still fed me and treated me with kindness, and they punished him horribly because of for what? For these little bits of coin.
30 pieces of silver.
30 pieces of silver. It was what this man's life was worth to me. And the guilt and the heaviness of that. Right. I haven't personally experienced anyone who has had that level of depression or anything like that. And but God, I just want to really quickly point out that if you're dealing with strong emotions, please get some help. And I'm going to link up a hotline in the bottom of the description for this, but I want to sort of touch into this just a little tiny little bit, and maybe not just fully into that, but like I said before, there's a lot of people, different types of people in on this channel, and there have been many times in my journey here where I've received some pretty negative comments from Christians specifically that have almost made me want to quit, like making videos. Like I'm like no more, like forget it. This is what we're talking about before I even hit 30,000 subscribers, and I was just like, I can't do this. Like, this is, I'm trying to love people and I'm getting heat for it. You know, people saying some pretty harsh things. I'm not going to repeat them, but some pretty harsh things. Now, what I've noticed is that every single time that I said I can't do this, I get an email. It's almost like God is saying, like, hey, I know that you're getting some backlash, but let me remind you why you're here. And I get an email from someone who says, hey, I was feeling really down and I had a fight with God, and I was in a weird place in my life, and I saw one of your videos, and I cried with you, and it made me pick up the Bible for the first time in a really long time, or it made it like I'm now back in my faith. And now I know that personally I have some people on the live chat who were kicked out of church. They were kicked out. They were kicked out. And so they were betrayed by their own church, and this feeling of heaviness, right? So really briefly, from your religious viewpoint, what would you say to someone who has been hurt in this way, who the church failed to love them in that way?
Yeah, and obviously every situation is different. So I apologize for not being able to speak into everything here. I look at God's love, and it saddens my heart to hear some of these situations where people are hurt by the church, or people are turned away from the church, or whatever the situation is. And I always sit there and go, you know what? Like, we're called to love. And I know that in my church, we don't just sit there and turn people away. We say, come in as you are. We want to see you. Like, we want to see you here. And that's not me trying to plug my church. That's me saying, like, I'm so blessed to be in a church that isn't like that. And I want to let you know, if you're out there, not all churches are like that. I'm sorry you went through that experience. I'm sorry that was your experience with the church. But the reality is, what's important is your relationship with God, right? Your relationship with God is what is important. And I truly believe that a relationship with God only gets stronger when you're surrounded by a fellowship of believers who are like-minded. Right? To help keep you accountable, to help you grow, to help you move forward. And I would just say to those people, like, I pray for you that you don't give up on God because of human failings. All right. I pray you don't give up on God because someone wasn't loving you the way they should, because the reality is God doesn't change. We talked about that. God doesn't change. His love for you has not changed. It's continually going. Don't give up just because some person made a really stupid mistake. All right. Go back to God. I pray that you go back to God if that's something. And if you want to talk more, again, I know Leonardo is going to put my email up here sometime, and you guys can please email me. There you go. Please email me. I'd love to talk to you and hear your story, and just, try to give you this hope, that's what Jesus gives. He gives hope. And actually, if it's okay, Leonardo, if I could a little bit here, just a reminder to those of you who are Christians out there, one of the biggest things that we miss is, like I just said, the Bible is hope. But we need to realize that this book is the most offensive book in the world. Let me say it one more time. This book is the most offensive book in the world. If you don't believe that Jesus is your Lord and Savior, right? If you don't, no way. Yes. Oh, come on. Oh,
that book right there.
Action Conference, Jesus Bible. But here's the thing. This book is offensive because it has one main message in it. And this is the message. You can't do it. That's the message, by the way. But let me tell you the hope that comes from that. When you accept the fact that you need a savior, that you can't do it on your own, then the love and hope come in and say, hey, guess what? Jesus already paid it for you. He loves you so much, he already paid it. So even though you cannot do it on your own, he already made a way. So for those of you who are Christian and are wondering, why are people not believing in God because you find this hope? It's because they haven't accepted the truth yet that they can't do it on their own, that they need God, And so for those of you who are out there who have been hurt, I pray that you give it another chance, right? I pray that you would turn to God and say, God, help me, because only you can, right? Only God can. And that's what we believe. And a relationship with God is the most important. I think it's something where, at the end of the day, whether you're a listener who is a Christian or not a Christian, I hope that the things that we're talking about and sounds like we'll be talking about, I hope that they bless you and get you to think deeper about these topics. Because one of the biggest things that we see in the world today is a breakdown of communication and a lack of thought, right? A lot of people don't think deeply about things because they'd rather just block and not talk about it. And this is just being on this podcast and listening, guys, I'm speaking to the viewers out there, you are doing something that most people don't do. You are willing to engage in rhetoric that may not agree with you, and you're willing to listen. And I think that's huge. And I want to commend Leonardo for everything that he's done on this channel. I've had a chance to watch a lot of his videos. I'm now a subscriber, and I can just see his heart for loving others, and I'm so excited to be here to discuss that.
Thank you. And as we speak, I'm probably posting on the live chat a link to our Discord server, which we created. It's a prayer server where if you are there, if you want to connect with someone and be with like-minded people, join us there. You can either request prayer or you can offer prayer to other people. We have resources where you can, watch either videos, or we have like quotes of the day, and we have just different chat rooms that you can talk to like-minded people and share this beautiful relationship with other people. Yeah, please join us there if you're interested in that as well. It's absolutely free. You just download it either on your phone or on your computer, and you can chat with people. We're gonna start having movie nights and things like that, and hopefully do some more awesome things there. So you're welcome to join us as well. Join us there. But okay, so thank you for that. Because I know that there are a lot of people that were in the place where I was, and I'm not trying to push anyone in any specific direction. I love everybody, and I'm not saying that go ahead and continue in your path. But I'm saying what I'd like to tell people is just like you would, date another person. When after being heartbroken from one relationship, I'm not saying go to another religion, move on, but maybe just start dating Christ by maybe just picking up the book and reading a little bit more about him, as I have. I haven't returned to a church per se, but in opening up the Bible and also watching services online, like I watch like the Elevation Worship, and I watch sometimes some Hillsong and other pastors that have invited me to watch their sermons. Like I'll watch, with an open mind and an open heart for it. I would just suggest that as well. But excellent. If we can learn something from Christ today, if you were in this podcast and we're just having that conversation with him, and he would give us some final words. It's kind of weird because I'm trying to tell you to like put yourself in Christ's place, All
right,
really
the word
challenging.
From God, everybody.
Yes, I'm receiving now. But anyways, what do you think the message for today would be? Like, you could take it from the Bible, obviously, so it doesn't seem like you're trying to speak on his behalf.
I mean, not speaking on God's behalf, but just speaking on how I've experienced God in my life, and from what I've seen in the years of ministry that I've been, a part of and proud to be a part of, and that God's just used me is amazing. I'm a pastor, but I'm a sinner too. I make a lot of mistakes in my life. I'm not the best person in the world. I've made mistakes. And the fact that God's love is still unchanging amidst all of that, I think that's the big takeaway is this: God loves you no matter what. Don't sit there and think, well, I did this, so God can't love me. No, it's not true. There's nothing you can do that will take away his love for you. There's nothing. That's the beauty of it. That's how great it is. And so, and then we ask, like, how can we then love those around us? We need to start from a place of selflessness. We need to start from a place that, like,
how can I begin that process? I hear that. I'm sitting here in the live chat. I'm listening after this conversation. I'm a viewer. I'm listening to this, and you're saying to me, start selflessly. How do I how do I get to that point?
And that's where it, from my personal opinion as a Christian, I believe that kind of love, that selfless kind of love, comes from God. I truly believe that's me, because your foundation's in the right spot. If your foundation is built on God and truth, and you realize what God has done for you, like, think about this for a second. It's sort of like when Jesus talks about removing the plank from your own eye before you remove the speck from your brother's, right? When you recognize the pain and the hurt and how hard it is to do that, you then have empathy, you can relate, and then you lovingly help the other person remove that speck. You can see clearly to do that. It's the same thing with love. If you accept the love that God has for you, that is so deep, and then you realize, oh my gosh, all these things that I have done that have been so horrible, and yet he still loves, you then can go to someone else and say, I'm a wretched sinner. I've done so much wrong in my life, and yet God still loves me and cherishes me. So now I can go and love and cherish you, even amidst your wrongs, and not judge you harshly for that. Like, that would be how I'd view it. I mean,
Yeah.
I see you're about to say something, so.
No, yeah, because I get a lot of those comments where they're like, we can't love this way because I'm a terrible sinner. I'm trash. I'm nothing. And you made a good point that you want to admit that you haven't behaved in accordance to what God would like you to behave. It's be open and admit that. But there's a very fine line between admitting and then beating yourself up about it.
Yeah.
And I don't want people to beat themselves up about it. I want them to just come to a neutral place where it says, yes, I did that. I disobeyed. I treated, my mother poorly, my daughters poorly, my sons poorly, my husband, or whatever it may be, my wife poorly. I'm there, but not go into this like, oh, I'm such a terrible person. I'm so stupid. How could I have done that? How could you love me? I totally understand if you want to turn your back away. I totally understand if you don't want to die for me, God. If you died on the cross, not for me, but he died for that person too. So
yeah, I think that's the point. Is it's not it's sort of like what you're talking about emphasis. It's not the focus on I'm a wretched sinner. It's the focus on God still died for, like, Jesus died for me. That's the focus in that sentence. To recognize that even amidst all the things that you've done that he is not pleased with, that isn't what he desires, he still loves you. And when you recognize that kind of love and you receive that kind of love, and you actually, like, that's the other thing that we need to remember. We need to receive that. Like, receiving isn't just like, example, someone gives me a present and then I put it up on the shelf and I don't open it. I haven't received that gift.
Ooh.
To receive that gift, I need to open it up and then cherish it and use it, right? And that's the point. Jesus is giving you this gift, and you now need to open that gift and use it and go, now that I've received that gift, I know, and I now have a completely different perspective. And now when I go to the people around me, I go, you know what? I love you as Christ loves you, because I know that no one's perfect. I know that we all make mistakes, and I love you, and I know that God loves you, and there's nothing that you could do that would take his love away, because I know what I've done, and I know that he still loves me. And that's the idea. That's the beauty of the love of God for you. And I pray that, this hits, that something out of this entire conversation has hit home with someone, because my goal is sort of aligned with you. I want to see people recognize love and to spread love. And I think it's very important, especially in the world we live in.
But I want to thank you so much for coming on today. And I've learned a lot. I'm pretty sure I know a couple of people who are going to pick up on some of the things that you said, and that it's going to resonate with them. And I know that some people are going to be moved, take at least one small step closer towards Christ, and know that it's okay if a non-Christian musician can do it, so can they, right? And then right before we leave, tacos or burritos?
Ooh. Okay, so I have a funny story about this. So the first time I had a burrito, it was one of my first youth pastor jobs I had in the summer, and my friend Will took me to Chipotle. I'd never been to Chipotle before, because my family's Italian, so we basically ate Italian. We didn't really eat a lot of Mexican food. This was before I realized my favorite, my spice palette, like how much I love spicy food. And they make this burrito. You might have to cut this out, by the way, but they make this burrito, and he leans over and looks at me and goes, dude, it's like a fetus. And I'm like, hey, what? but it was so big. I mean, this is back when they used to pack them. They still pack them now, but it was so good. But I'm going to have to say tacos just because I like the ability to eat my food and not have to worry about it all falling all over the place and not correctly. So, but here's the thing. There's a caveat. If the food is equivalent in size, like there's enough tacos to make up for the burrito, I say tacos.
Okay, cool. So you like a little bit of order, a little bit of peace in your life.
Yes.
There's already enough chaos.
There's already enough chaos. I don't need
You don't need the food falling apart.
Exactly.
Excellent. But thank you so much for clarifying a couple of those things, and thank you for talking about the reckless love of God with me, and teaching me a little bit more about what the message and a little bit more of Christ. Like I said, I'm a student of Christ now, and that doesn't mean, and Christ isn't here exactly in person, I should say, to teach me that. So the next best thing is to learn from the people who actually have studied what he's said, and get a little deeper and pick up bits and pieces from here and there.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, Leonardo. It's been a blast, and I look forward to speaking with you afterwards, and to continue to pick your brain and see what you're thinking. And I'm so excited to be here, and so excited that you are doing what you're doing. I mean, I'm just going to say this right now for those of you who are watching. Leonardo's heart right now is about loving others, and if you don't get that, I really pray that something sticks out, that you guys see his heart, because his heart is not to tear people apart. His heart is to bring people together. And I'm so excited to see someone who's willing to do that on these platforms, and do that, especially as we briefly alluded to, especially in the time in which we live. I mean, it's so important. So Leonardo, thank you for your heart of love for all the people, and for inviting me on. And I just want to thank you for everything that you're doing on your channel.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. It's weird to receive, that kind of a compliment, but I'm not used to it, but thank you. I accept
you're welcome.
I accept it. Thank you so much. Senor, it was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much. We're going to have another conversation. One podcast is not enough.
Sounds good, Leonardo. Well, have a great day. Thank you again, and God bless, man.
Likewise. Thank you so much. Well, there you have it. So much was covered, Familia. Before we head out, I want to hear from you. What was your big takeaway from this conversation? Let me know about it in the comment section down below. If you got some value from today's podcast, please be sure to hit the like button. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. And as always, Familia, thank you so much for joining me on this journey. Please continue to spread that love that comes from above, and I'll see you on our next adventure. Peace.